Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first VS Tech Talk session. My name is Liz, and I'm joined by Software Development Manager Marty Lewis and his team. We have Ryan, Arif, and Nick. And as you may or may not know, this group works on our Synergy integration for Visual Studio, also known as SDI. And Visual Studio is such a comprehensive IDE. There are so many tools within it right out the box to make your life as a developer a lot easier. So our goal today is just to chat about the features within Visual Studio that this team uses on a regular basis to enhance their productivity and efficiency. So we'll cover a variety of topics, but if we don't get to something that you're particularly interested in, there will be time for a Q&A afterwards. And in the meantime, you can feel free to post any questions you have in the chat area or the Q&A area as well. And as always, this session is being recorded. So to start, I'm going to take us back to our virtual conference in May, which both feels like it was a decade ago and yesterday. And in his session, Marty mentioned the performance profiler. And it looks like a great way to get insight into things like CPU usage and database performance. So the first question would be, what tools within this profiler suite do you use most often and why?
So I can start with that. We haven't historically used the profiler because it hasn't really met our needs. We've used stuff outside of VS like .trace, but the analyzer in Visual Studio is getting better, and we have started working that into our tool set. So some of the stuff recently has been for execution time analysis when we're trying to track down like how much of a performance hit are we taking by making a change like this in a performance critical area, or are we getting any sort of performance gains out of this? This has proven useful for us in those scenarios.
How about on the memory side, Arif?
Yeah, personally, I have used Visual Studio diagnostic tools for the purpose of memory profiling of the programs that I'm debugging. And I'm going to show a little demo on how I use that tool here. So I hope everyone can see my screen.
It is loaded.
Okay. As you can see, I am currently debugging SDI itself. I just perform a go-to definition operation. As you can see, I hit a breakpoint here, and I already have the diagnostic tools loaded up on the memory usage tool. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm just going to take a snapshot here, and this is going to take a snapshot of the overall memory usage profile of the program at the moment. And as you can see, it created that snapshot. And then I'm just going to continue execution to hit the second breakpoint there. So what I'm trying to find out is basically if this operation results in like overall large memory growth or memory leak or anything along that line. And as you can see, the number of objects actually went down, and the heap size or the memory usage actually went down. So we're good there. And the tooling also supports drilling down to the actual, like, the difference itself. You can see which objects grew or shrunk, and the size itself. You can sort by the number of objects that were added or deleted during that time period. Looks like these are mostly Microsoft objects, and there's some data structures that was destroyed between the two breakpoints there. So using this tool just kind of gives you an idea of how your program is doing memory-wise. So I find that very useful in debugging certain things like memory leak or overall memory usage. So yeah, that's what I use it for.
I think the important note, though, is this of course only works with Synergy.net. For traditional, we don't really have the same tooling support, but it will interoperate between Synergy.net and C# and all your other .NET languages, so you can get a complete picture of how your application is running.
That's correct. Yep.
And another handy tool. We've heard good things from certain customers about this vertical tabs feature. Would anyone want to go into detail about that?
Yeah, I can show off some vertical tabs. Let's make sure I share the right screen here. That should be that. All right, can you see my Visual Studio here?
It is loaded.
All right. So not in a super fancy project I have going on here, but a project with stuff that's named either very similarly or exactly the same. I have all my tabs open, and it's not easy at all to know what I'm actually editing here until I click on the tab or hover over it. I do make a lot of use of vertical tabs, and you can access it through the cogwheel off the side of the top tab bar here, like nested right next to the Solution Explorer. If you have the same setup, you go into Options, or you can just go straight into Tools, Options, and then find the tabs and windows under the Environment section. And then you can change your tab layout. So if I just set this to right, ta-da, it'll move all my tabs onto the right side, though I personally like the left side. And by default, it'll group by projects. So, now I know, I'm actually editing the correct class in the project I think I'm actually editing in before I even, open the source file. If you really wanted to, you could get rid of that grouping, but I can't imagine that you would want to.
Source file anarchy.
Yeah. You can also change how it's sorted. So you can change change it to what was open recently, or last, or first. Alphabetically seems to work for me pretty well. And it's not in Visual Studio at the moment, but it sounds like they're going to do some sort of color coding operation that you can enforce on your tabs to make it easier to pick out which files you're looking at. I like it. I use it for SVI development. Our tests aren't set up to deal with this, but I do make use of it for product development quite a bit.
Now I'm curious, did you actually start using vertical tabs before my conference presentation, or did you learn about it there with everyone else?
I learned about it there with everyone else, and I'm sold. Give me that. I have not looked back.
We tell customers it helps to go to the conference, and sometimes it helps employees to also attend the conference.
Learn something new every day.
So another little insider tip. I mean, we know that code snippets are a great way to save time and just kind of develop very quickly. And it sounds like there are ways that you can create your own code snippets. So I think, Arif, you were going to take us through that process and how that's helpful.
Yeah, I can show you how to add custom snippets to SDI. Share my screen again here. Okay. So I guess we can start with
looking at. There we go.
Sorry. Okay. I guess we can start with looking at what a snippet file looks like. It's basically just XML with a snippet tag and code snippet on the top. You can look at the exact specification of this if you just search for Visual Studio Code snippet. But basically, the code that you want to insert goes here. The language goes there. And I will show you. Sorry.
Your code there needs a little revision.
Right. This code is definitely not Synergy DBL syntax. Just something I pick off real quick. So to use the code snippets, you use the code snippets manager here from tools dropdown. You can click on it. And then I already added it, but you just click import and navigate to the location wherever you put the snippets is. In that case, that's where I put it. And then you just add it. And you can choose to add it to my code snippets. Probably better to put it here than in the default Synergy location. And once that's added, you can just invoke it like any other snippet. As you can see there, it expanded square root into this chunk of code, which is, again, not valid Synergy syntax, but it demonstrates the idea.
Yeah, so basically any kind of routine structure that you use in your code, you could easily make your own snippet for and reduce some of that boilerplate.
Yep. So if you find yourself typing the same code a lot, what might be useful to create a snippet for it so you can save yourself some typing.
And that does... Sorry, that does support navigation through different fields in the snippet as well. So if you have pieces that you need to fill out, you can fill those out by tabbing through the fields once the snippet has been executed.
Yep.
Where would people find our snippets if they wanted to take a look at how they're constructed and maybe learn how the field system works or how they might get the name of the class they're in?
So you can open the code snippets manager again, and I think by default it goes to ASP, but you'll want Synergy there, and you can expand this. And if you just click on any of these, it'll show you the location where the snippet file was installed, the full path of it, and you can navigate to that. Let's try this one. I did not want to open Visual Studio, but fine.
It's fine.
And as you can see, this is a snippet for attribute. This one's a little bit more involved because it involves
generating a custom attribute, right?
Yep. This generates a custom attributes based on based on the class where you're at. So yeah, if you're ever curious about how any of our other snippets works and you want to modify a little bit one of the pre-existing one, you can just navigate to this dialog, look for the snippet you're interested in, and edit it yourself and make a copy.
My favorite snippet is definitely the CTOR snippet because it infers the name of the class that you're currently in. So if you're curious on that kind of behavior, you could crack that one open and see, hey, if I want to use the name of the class that my snippet is located in, you can get that functionality.
Yep. All right, I'll stop sharing here.
And on a not super related note, I guess, your team, do you guys have any kind of like style guide? Do you have any formatting guidelines that you use when you're coding? And then does that help you, I guess, come up with consistent code?
Yeah, we have. We don't really have a hard style guide, we do have some soft style guides like use spaces versus tabs. Tabs are for spaces and things like that, to help make our code more consistent. And yeah, I'd say it's very, very helpful to have a style guide like that, especially when it comes to like reviewing code during pull requests and things like that. You usually see real fast if there's any style inconsistencies, and it's just very helpful to keep the overall code base in one style.
Is there any way that Visual Studio kind of helps with setting up those, I guess, soft rules?
So there's a thing called editor config. So if you implement it, I guess it's more a hard rule rather than a soft rule. But if you apply a .editor config to your overall code base, it'll apply whatever settings that you put in the .editor config to your overall code base, and it'll take it'll even apply it to old codes. Like if you just reformat the document, it'll apply it the settings that is in the editor config, and of course it'll also apply to new code. Like if you start writing new code, it'll apply the settings in there too. And in fact, I have written a Synergy e-news article about editor config in the past. So if you are interested in more information about that, you can consult that article.
Do you have a link to that for us, Liz? Awesome.
So that link is posted in the chat if you want to check that out.
Yep, that's the one.
And just a very, I guess, general question. So I guess this could go in a number of ways. How do you set up your workspace in Visual Studio for your own kind of needs, productivity and efficiency wise?
I don't really do anything. I don't really do anything too much to alter the original settings of Visual Studio. I find the way it comes out of the box is plenty useful and intuitive for me. What the most I do is probably just close the Game Foundation server Explorer on a fresh Visual Studio install, because we don't really use that. But otherwise, everything I need to be productive is there by default. So
the new Git window is much better than the TFS window anyway.
Yes.
At least in my opinion.
I tend to go for maximum code editing space, at least when I'm editing code, and then I make that almost as small as possible sometimes when I'm doing debugging, so I can see the call stack and everything and the locals and the watch and all that stuff. But yeah, for the most part, it's just straight out of the box.
Nice. Well, that's probably a good sign. You don't need to add a bunch of anything after the fact. You just kind of start working with it.
Debugging is always a mess because there's so many useful tool windows and there's just not enough visual space. So like if I'm doing anything with threads, I'll dock the threads like a editor window so I can maximize that view and then switch back and forth to the editor views. But I like to code on an ultra wide, so I use maximal width, trying to get 2 or 3 editor windows side by side so I can see multiple code files and still maximizing editor space. But if I need to do a lot of Test Explorer stuff, I'll remove one window so I've got a little bit of that horizontal space for Solution Explorer and the Test Explorer.
Nice.
I'm in the same boat as Marty, except I have 3 monitors, so I just kind of can spread it out over a really wide area and can see all the windows at once. It's very helpful.
So
do any of you ever use the like editor splits so you can have a single source file or you can have two views of a source file in one source window?
I haven't used it for two views of one source file, but I have occasionally done horizontal splits to see like small sections of code that I need to look at in two different source files at the same time.
So the takeaway is just make Visual Studio as big as possible. Get as much screen space and just make it very big.
Microsoft, remove as much toolbar as possible. Give us more editor space. Thank you.
Sure.
Maybe turn word wrap on so you can get chain link expressions going on.
No word wrap. Do the manual word wrap.
Possibly a hard question to answer, I suppose. What's your favorite productivity feature in Visual Studio?
Just IntelliSense in general is very helpful, I think, when I'm writing code. Completion, go to definition, parameter help for methods. That's very useful because obviously no one can remember every parameters for every methods in their code base. That's just not feasible. So IntelliSense is very helpful to me.
IntelliSense is real good. I do like the parallel build stuff on top of that, just because you didn't get to see it when Arif had the SDI source open, but we do have a fair number of projects, and C# does it for us, and we do it for Synergy source, is being able to run multiple project builds side by side, both at the command line and in process, makes getting back to testing something or investigating an issue real good if we made a change. And then also not having to rebuild everything all the time, both for us doing the SDI development proper, but then also doing stuff in Synergy. It makes it real nice to be able to just make a change and iterate super fast.
But why wait for a build at all? You get squiggles in the editor saying you have problems, so you don't have to wait for a build. You just keep coding. No build, no test, just code.
Well, okay, so that helps you with like syntax errors and compile time errors, but doesn't really help you with like logic errors.
That's true.
But we do like the red squigglies. We do.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Very helpful.
Even if they are a little annoying at times, very helpful. Like, hey, you got a problem.
Yes, I know I have a problem. I haven't finished writing this code yet.
Awesome. So I know we have Visual Studio 2022 coming down the pike here. Are there any features within that you're especially excited about from just like a coding experience standpoint?
So I've gotten to use quite a bit of 2022 preview, and they've made a bunch of personalization tweaks and UI difference changes and all sorts of things are going on. But I think the real takeaway from 2022 is 64-bit. The 64-bit process loads faster, solutions load faster, and you're less likely to run into those wonderful 4 gig memory limits of the 32-bit process. So it's like VS unlocked. It's so good. I'm so excited to see our customers have access to this.
Yep, I concur. Just the fact that Visual Studio is moving to 64-bit, just the performance increase by themselves is massive. There's other improvements, of course, but I feel like the one that people will notice the most is just the performance, just going to 64-bit.
Great. And our last planned question, anything our audience should know about new features and updates included in the upcoming release?
I do have to plug the .NET Core unit test support that's going in. You could technically get .NET Core class libraries constructed in such a way that they mimic a unit test project with all the references and stuff. And you could run it at the command line through .NET Test, but it's not really a great user experience, and so we're fixing that problem. You're actually going to get a proper project template coming with the next release, and you're going to get all the goodies in Visual Studio. You're going to get the Test Explorer. You're going to be able to run and debug tests. If you're running tests at the command line through like an Azure pipeline or something along those lines, you'll be able to use that because VS Test Console at the command line will work too, just straight out of the box. You won't have to like jump through any hoops for any of that.
I know the Harmony Core guys are really excited about that.
Yeah, I demoed that yesterday, and Jeff was like, "Oh, it's Christmas."
And since we just heap praise on Visual Studio 2022, of course, I have to plug our support for the Visual Studio 2022 preview in the upcoming release. So we try to keep up as much as possible with Visual Studio releases, and we're continuing that trend. So we are going to provide initial release for the Visual Studio 2022 preview version, and we're gonna continue working on it as the life cycle of 2022 goes.
I think this is our first time shipping support for a unreleased Visual Studio, right? This is new big news for the SDI team.
Is that true? I don't remember. 2019 was so long ago. Okay. I did not know that. Even though I was present.
2019 was out, and we did initial support for it, didn't we? We didn't have like full support until a couple weeks after, right?
Yeah, I think we were recommending that people wait until the 16.1 release of 2019 because it fixed a number of important experience things. Like we didn't have project template in the create new project dialog until 16.1.
All right.
Well, any third party language did.
Yeah.
That was fun.
We have a lot of great stuff coming up in this release. I'm surprised no one talked about. We have the data language colorization landing in this upcoming version. So if you like editing your repository schemas as code, we're going to have full colorization support there. None of the other IntelliSense niceties yet. Figured we'd start with something relatively easy, but if it's something people like, we can continue doing more.
Yep. If you want more support, more features in the Synergy data language space, definitely let us know. It'll help us prioritize.
It's also just a whole bunch of IntelliSense fixes as well. Some good quality live stuff.
Oh man. Do you work with arrays? Are you ready to actually have the dimensions of your array in hoverover and other great IntelliSense features? They're upcoming. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah, I forgot about the array indexes not showing up. So accurate rank representation in IntelliSense. We got improved support for lambdas, so you get your lambda symbol inside your lambda scope. We've got all sorts of fixes for things around the lambdas that didn't really show completion or anything anymore or correctly. But we just did support for the null conditional operator and the null forgiveness operator. So bang dot and question dot on symbols, so you can investigate the members of those things. It's going to be a really good SDI release for IntelliSense.
The nullable regions too.
That's right.
Yeah, from the compiler, yeah.
Oh, I wish I worked with arrays now. I feel like I'm missing out. We do have a question here. Oh, sorry. Apologies. For developers who have not yet made the switch and are more comfortable in Workbench or another IDE, what are some, I guess, high-level top 5 reasons why they should try Visual Studio?
Well, I think the number one on that list is easily debugging. No matter what other IDE you're not having a debugging experience like you get in VS, whether you're in .NET Core, traditional, having the ability to investigate the symbols in real time and step through code and get that breakpoint functionality. It's just a huge win for actually solving problems in your existing applications.
I've never really used Workbench much, but I can't imagine the IntelliSense experience to be better than Visual Studio. So I would throw IntelliSense in that bag.
I think that's fair. Anyone else want to chip in on their top 5?
I mean, it's obviously the IDE of choice for new features and all that stuff. So any new feature you want for Synergy development, it's going into Visual Studio.
And IDE source control integration, so you can see your changes pushed to Git, SVN, whatever your source control of choice is, right in Visual Studio. You can't do that in Workbench.
And a pretty decent source history experience while you're at it. So you can view the history of files. You can see the diffs inline. You can get a blame history of who changed what in this source file, all inline in the editor. And of course, squiggles. You don't get squiggles anywhere else.
One of them new features. Well, new. That's 2 years old at this point, isn't it?
Is it really? I guess that's true.
How many was that? 4 or something?
Does Workbench support the build stuff? Because as a developer, like if you have 100 projects and you have to rebuild everything every time, like that's just wasted time. Unless you want to be those guys in the what was it, the XKCD cartoon, doing sword fights while your code compiles. I'm not gonna judge you. That sounds fun to me, but
it's not even like the parallel nature of the builds in VS. That's a bonus win. But like the builds in Workbench are project centric, so they don't really understand the other projects and the whole dependency structure of things. So it's very much a one project, one compile experience. So that the idea of the build system understanding your projects and their relationships and being able to determine what needs to rebuild is a huge win. You're not sitting there going, "Oh, did I rebuild all of the parts?" It just always does it right.